This is Soul Signal, where the soul comes to rest. My name is Patrice. In a moment, a story will begin. You don't need to do anything with it. You don't need to remember it, or carry it, or learn from it. Only let it move through you, the way water moves through open hands. You built something. That matters. I want to say that before anything else tonight. Whatever the structure is, whatever the life looks like from the outside, you built it. You committed. You stayed consistent. You showed up when it was hard. You kept going when you didn't feel like it. You made the responsible choice more times than you can count. And you're still here. Still upright. Still functional. Still the one people count on. And underneath all of that, underneath the competence and the consistency and the life that looks, by most measures, like it's working, something is off. Not broken, not in crisis, not even something you could easily explain to someone else without it sounding like a complaint. Just off. Like a note played slightly flat. Like a coat that fits but doesn't quite sit right on the shoulders. Like you've been in a room that was built for someone who used to be you. If that's where you are tonight, you are in exactly the right place. We're not going to solve anything tonight. We're just going to sit with it. Together. In the quiet. Here is something no one tells you about doing everything right. Doing everything right doesn't guarantee alignment. It guarantees stability. It guarantees a certain kind of security. It guarantees that from the outside, the life looks sound. But alignment, that sense of moving through your days in the right direction, in the right skin, in a life that actually fits the woman you've become, that is not guaranteed by doing everything right. You can be responsible and misaligned at the same time. You can be successful and exhausted at the same time. You can have built something real and still feel quietly, persistently, like you're maintaining a structure that was designed for a version of you that no longer fully exists. That's not ingratitude. I want to name that clearly. Because one of the things that keeps women stuck in lives that no longer fit is the guilt of acknowledging it. The internal voice that says, you should be grateful. Other people would be grateful for this. You worked for this. You can't just, and the sentence trails off because even the voice doesn't know how to finish it. Wanting more or wanting different is not the same as being ungrateful. Growth is not betrayal. Outgrowing a structure you built is not evidence that you built the wrong thing. It's evidence that you kept growing after the structure was finished. Here is what it looks like. You know the feeling of Sunday evening, the way it arrives, that particular weight that settles somewhere in the chest or the stomach as the weekend closes. Not because something bad is coming, just because what's coming is the same thing that was there last week, and the week before, and the week before that. You know the feeling of sitting in a meeting or at a desk or in a role you've performed 100 times and noticing that you're watching yourself from a slight distance. Not disengaged, not failing, just not quite there. Like the most essential part of you has quietly stepped back from the surface and is watching the rest of you do a very competent impression of presence. You know the exhaustion that isn't physical, the tiredness that sleep doesn't fix, because the body got enough rest. But the deeper thing, the part that actually needs tending, didn't get what it needed. And you wake up restored on the surface and still depleted underneath. I know what that depletion feels like from the inside. Not as a concept, as a physical thing. There were mornings I would get dressed for work and feel it start. That wave. Not quite fear, not quite dread. Something that lived in the chest and didn't have a clean name. I would have to pull over, call someone, just to get through the drive. The signal that was saying, this is not the life. This is the safe life. This is the responsible life. This is the life that proves you can handle things. But this is not the life. And then I would get there and do the job and do it well. Because that's what you do when you've spent decades learning how to override the signal. I started looking at pictures of myself, and I didn't look like me. My eyes. There was something in them that scared me. A sadness that had gotten so deep, I'd stopped noticing it from the inside. But the camera saw it. That's what being slowly withering actually looks like. Not dramatic. The life force going quietly, while everything on the outside kept functioning. Not a breakdown. Just a woman's eyes telling the truth that the rest of her had gotten very good at hiding. I kept pushing through for years because pushing through felt like strength. It took me a long time to understand that it wasn't strength. It was a woman who hadn't yet given herself permission to want something different. I kept pushing through for years because pushing through felt like strength. It took me a long time to understand that it wasn't strength. It was a woman who hadn't yet given herself permission to want something different. You know what it's like to be asked, "How are you?" and to say, "Fine." Not because you're lying, but because fine is accurate. You are fine. You are functional. You are managing. But fine is not the same as alive. And somewhere underneath the fine is a woman who remembers what alive felt like, and who isn't sure how to get back to it, or even if that's allowed. You worked hard for this, and hard doesn't always mean aligned. That is not a failure statement. That is one of the most honest things a woman in midlife can say to herself. Hard and aligned are not the same measure. Earned and right are not the same measure. Stable and alive are not the same measure. You can have all of the first ones and still be quietly hungry for the second. That hunger is not a flaw. That hunger is information. I want to offer you something. Not a plan, not a directive, not a list of what comes next. Just a reframe. One quiet thought to set beside the restlessness. Sometimes we build from survival. Let that sit for a moment. Sometimes we build from survival. When the structure was being built, when you were making the choices, taking the path, building the life that now holds you, what were you building toward? Safety, maybe. Security. Stability. Proof. Proof that you could do it. That you were capable. That you could take care of yourself and whoever else needed taking care of. That you would not be a burden. That you would be fine. Those are not small things. Those are serious, legitimate, important things. And the woman who built toward them was doing exactly what the moment required. She was solving the problem in front of her. She was being responsible. She was being intelligent. She was building from what was available to her in that season of her life. But the season changed. The immediate problem got solved or changed shape or stopped being the most urgent thing. And now there is space. Maybe for the first time in a long time, for a different question. Not, what do I need to survive? But, what do I actually want? And that question is terrifying for a woman who has spent decades being very, very good at the first one. Because want feels indulgent. Want feels risky. Want feels like something you're not sure you're allowed. But sometimes we build from survival, and later we realize we want something softer, something more alive, something that doesn't just hold you, but actually fits you. The woman you are now, not the woman who was solving for safety. The one on the other side of that. The one who made it through. The one who is still here and doesn't know yet what she's allowed to build next. You're allowed to want something more, to want something different, to look at what you built and say, this was right for then, and I'm not sure it's right for now. That is not ingratitude. That is clarity. And clarity, even when it's uncomfortable, is a gift. I want you to come somewhere with me. Not far, just outside. An evening walk. The kind you take not because you have somewhere to be, but because the inside of the house has gotten too close and you need the air. It's that hour just after the light changes. Not dark yet, but the bright edge of the day has gone. Everything is softer now. The colors a little less certain of themselves. The air a little cooler than it was an hour ago. The street is quiet. Not silent. There are the sounds of a neighborhood settling. Someone's door. A dog somewhere, briefly. The low sound of a television through an open window. Life continuing in all its ordinary, unhurried ways. You've walked this street before, many times. You know which houses have the good gardens, which one always has a light on in the front room. The tree on the corner that's older than most of the houses. The cracked place in the pavement you've stepped around so many times you do it without thinking. Familiar. Known. And tonight, somehow, slightly different. Not the street. The street is the same. You're different. Or you're noticing differently. The way you notice things when you've been moving very fast for a long time, and then suddenly slow down, and the world comes back into detail. The texture of the bark on that old tree. You never registered it before. You've seen it 100 times, and tonight you actually see it. You slow your pace a little, not for any reason, just because there's no reason to hurry. And sometimes, rarely, but sometimes, there's no reason to hurry and you actually let yourself walk like there isn't. Your shoulders drop, just slightly, the way they do when you've been holding them and then the holding stops being necessary. There's a house on this street that you've always noticed. Not the biggest, not the most impressive, just the one that always looks lived in. The garden not quite perfect, but clearly tended with love rather than performance. A light on in a back room. Something growing in pots on the step that someone chose because they wanted it, not because it matched the exterior. It looks like a home that was built around what the people inside actually needed, not what the neighborhood expected, not what a certain kind of success requires, just what they needed. You stop for a moment, just for a moment, and what comes isn't a plan. It's not a strategy. It's not even a clear picture. It's just a feeling. The feeling of what it's like when you're doing something that's actually yours. Not performing competence. Not showing up because someone needs you to. Not waiting for the shift to be over. Just in it. Fully. The way you are when you're creating something and you look up and 2 hours have passed and your chest is full instead of hollow. That feeling. You haven't forgotten it. It hasn't gone anywhere. It's been waiting. Patient the way true things are patient. Knowing you'd find your way back to it when you were ready. You're getting ready. Long enough to register something. That what you want, what you've maybe always wanted, underneath the building and the achieving and the staying consistent, is something like that. Not the house. The quality. The feeling of a life built around what you actually need. What actually fits. What actually feels like yours. You start walking again. The air is cooler now. That particular coolness of evening when the day's heat has finally let go. Clean. A little sharp. The kind of air that makes you feel slightly more awake and slightly more yourself. Nothing has been decided tonight. You haven't made any plans. You haven't solved anything. You haven't mapped the route from here to there. You've just walked and noticed and let yourself want something without immediately talking yourself out of it. That is not nothing. The wanting is the beginning, not the plan, not the strategy, not the execution. The wanting. The quiet, persistent, honest signal that something in you knows there is more and is ready whenever you are to move toward it. You turn toward home, the street behind you, the lights of the house ahead, the evening doing what evenings do, deepening slowly, without urgency into night. You are not in a hurry. For the first time in a while, you are genuinely not in a hurry. Let me speak to you directly now. You built what you thought would make you secure. You built what you thought would make you respected. You built what you thought would make you safe. And you did it. That is real. That counts. That cannot be taken back. But sometimes we build from survival. And later we realize we want something softer. That is not failure. That is growth. You are allowed to want a life that doesn't cost you yourself. You are allowed to want work that feels like you. You are allowed to want mornings that don't feel like bracing. You are allowed to want to feel alive inside the life you're actually living. Not the life that's coming. This one. You don't have to burn anything down tonight. You don't have to make any announcements. You don't have to have a plan. You don't have to explain yourself tonight. The restlessness is not a verdict. It's a signal. And signals don't need to be acted on at midnight. They just need to be heard. So tonight, I hear you. The wanting is real. The tiredness is real. The sense that there is more, that you are more than the structure you've been maintaining, that is real. And it's not going anywhere. It will be there in the morning. It will be there next week. It is patient in the way that true things are patient. It doesn't need you to act on it tonight to still be true. Tonight is for rest. And rest is not the same as giving up. Rest is how the next version of you gets strong enough to rise. You don't have to decide tonight. You don't have to explain yourself tonight. You don't have to burn anything down tonight. You can rest and let the next version of you rise slowly. The wanting is real. The signal is real. And you are more than the structure you've been maintaining. You always were. The evening air is still cool. The street is quiet. The light is low and warm. Nothing is required of you right now. You can rest. You can rest. You can rest. Rest here as long as you need. The story has done its work. You don't have to hold it. You can let it go the way you let a breath go, completely, without watching where it goes. Soul Signal will be here when you return. There are more stories waiting, more nights like this one. Until then, may you dream in light. May you wake in grace. And may you always know you are the signal.